Welcome back to Everyone's Wyatt. I'm your host, Joellen Davidson, and this is episode 3 called The Gunner. Today we go back in time and start to build Wyatt's life calendar while solving the puzzles of his time in the military. If you haven't listened to the first 2 episodes, run back and catch up. We'll wait. Go on, we'll be here. For everyone else, here we go. I have to start this episode with a confession. If you're one of the handful of family members anxiously awaiting each episode to drop, you know this one took an extra week. In fact, what you're hearing is a complete rewrite. When telling a story like this, parts of it start sounding like a book report, because there are simply so many facts and dates that, while needed for the big picture, in moments can bore even the storyteller. While recording the original version of this episode, something that I couldn't pinpoint bugged me like a tickle in my ear. I was spending the evening of Veterans Day, ironically, with my microphone, talking about Wyatt's Navy days, when I noticed frustration in my voice on playbacks. Plus, you'd think I had Teuberts with all the 4-letter future edits that were piling up. I paused to take a breath and suddenly questioned the accuracy of one specific date in the story. This is one of those moments Morgan and I were talking about in episode 2, where for no reason there's an urge to search through my Wyatt boxes or take a deeper dive online into one specific detail. Well, this one led me down a new rabbit hole that, if I could draw it on paper, would look more like an ant colony, which is kind of how my brain works anyway. That date I was worried about, it wasn't even wrong. The frustration of dates and facts, and then the questioning of one certain date, did, however, lead me to find one event I completely forgot and brand new information I learned, which I've hidden for you in this extended episode. So thank you for your patience while I refocused this part of the story. Oh, and Wyatt, thanks for the nudge. For Wyatt's origin story, I need to take you back to the Civil War, when a man named John Godfrey Teubert, an immigrant from Germany, joined Company C of the Virginia 22nd Regiment alongside a man named George Washington Cole. These 2 men had no idea they would become fathers-in-law when John's son, Charles Lewis Teubert, would marry George's daughter, Ella Jane, almost 20 years later in 1884. 35-year-old Charles and 22-year-old Ella welcomed their firstborn son, my great-grandfather, Wyatt Evans Teubert, into the world August 31st, 1889. They already had a daughter, 2-year-old Thelma, at that time. For perspective, here's some news from the year Wyatt was born.
The Eiffel Tower in Paris is complete and open to the public.
Ben-Hur, starring Charlton Heston, is the most popular movie in theaters.
It's official. Oklahoma is now our 46th state.
As we learned in episode 1, the Teubert way of life in Golly Bridge, West Virginia was humble and wholesome. Traditionally, in this era, Wyatt's family background would have bred generations of farmers and military men. And so it did. Wyatt joined the Navy right out of school in 1907. When he enlisted, he left behind at home his parents and 4 brothers. John was 16, Arthur 14, William, who they called Willie, was 10, and little Waitman was only 2 years old. His sister Thelma had married in March of that same year, so she had already moved out of the Teubert home. Much of the information I share with you comes from newspaper articles or interviews, but a lot of detail about his military career was available to me only because of another bomb dropped by my grandmother, Nanny. As a former Navy wife, I had a natural curiosity about Wyatt's naval career. as I had lived in Navy towns like Bremerton, Washington, Norfolk, Virginia, and on the Navy base in Santa Rita, Guam. One day, I happened to tell Nanny that I wish I knew on which Navy ships Wyatt served. She looked up from her crossword puzzle over the frame of her glasses, continuing to slowly rock her recliner, and asked,
Would that be in his service record?
"Well, yes, of course it would," I thought. "Too bad we don't have such a thing." But out loud, I answered, "Yes, I believe it would." It almost makes me laugh as I remember the innocent expression on her face as she quickly clapped the pages of her puzzle book closed while saying matter-of-factly,
Well, I have that.
I watched speechless as Nanny scurried off to her room. She returned with a brown envelope saved from her mother's things. My dear Nanny. Once again, I whispered to myself, 6 things. She said she only knew 6 things. This won't be the last time I whisper that, believe me.
Do you wish you could make a difference in the world but think to yourself, I'm only one person, what can I do? Embracing Community is a nonprofit actively pooling together people just like you to help Kentuckians from Paducah to Pikeville and every town in between. Visit embracingcommunity.org to learn about 2 specific projects for which we desperately need donations to fund. Your donation could help heat the home of an elderly person on a fixed income this winter, or pay the tuition of a student in trade school, technical school, or other specialty education program. Embracing Community also monitors fundraising sites and social media for opportunities to reward Kentuckians who are out there trying to make the world a better place. We need your help to double our efforts in 2026. Please consider making a donation at embracingcommunity.org.
As it turns out, she did not have Wyatt's actual service record. The envelope contained delicate papers that turned out to be his military medical record. I was shocked to see that it provided far more context about him and his career than only his service record would have, including details about conversations between Wyatt and Navy corpsmen and doctors treating him. I was afraid to take these old documents with me, so I scanned them and gave Nanny back the envelope for safekeeping. In 1907, when Wyatt enlisted, new sailors did not have what we now know as boot camp. So until 4 years later, the Navy was basically sign and sail. Wyatt was first stationed aboard the USS Franklin, a training ship. The Franklin did not look like the Navy ships of today, and, to be honest, it was a bit odd-looking. If you're not seeing the photos on YouTube right now, picture a big wooden ark with what looked like a screened-in porch at the end. I'm not exaggerating. She was used as a receiving and training ship in Norfolk, Virginia, where I lived exactly 91 years later, and long before I knew a thing about Wyatt. That year, Norfolk was celebrating the 300th anniversary of the founding of Jamestown Colony by hosting the World's Fair with about 3 million people in attendance. The chosen spot for the fair was on Sewell's Point, where Naval Station Norfolk is now located. In fact, some of the original buildings from the fair are still on Admiral's Row. 1 year into his assignment on the Franklin, in July of 1908, Wyatt received news that his 52-year-old father, Charles Louis Teubert, had died of peritonitis. That's an abdominal infection, which is often caused when an organ ruptures and bacterial infection spreads throughout the abdomen. 2 weeks later, Wyatt was in the infirmary himself after experiencing tremendous pain in his face. Shaving and sleeping were increasingly difficult during frequent attacks of intense, jolting pain. He was diagnosed with trigeminal neuralgia, which is a very painful and severely distracting condition. Constant focus was a huge part of Wyatt's job in the Navy, so having this condition could affect his performance. He was a gunner's mate, charged with operating and maintaining the ship's weapons, guns, and ordnance. Gunnery required extensive training on the ship's mechanical, electrical, and weapons systems. At this time in history, the U.S. Navy was in a marathon race with other countries to perfect accuracy and distance of the weapons aboard each of their naval vessels. In fact, in military history, the era in which Wyatt served in gunnery was the most important time for this field. When I studied this portion of his life, he started feeling very Forrest Gump-like to me, as he just happened to be involved with or adjacent to so many historically significant moments. The difference was, Forrest Gump stumbled aimlessly into the moments of his life, where Wyatt had a drive, an overachieving ambition that pushed him into the middle of these events. You'll see what I mean by this in future episodes too, because the map of his life and these events were very well documented separately, and now together here on this podcast. Getting back to it, in 1910, Wyatt was reassigned to the USS Minnesota, where he set his sights on becoming an expert in the field of gunnery. The Minnesota, also in Norfolk, was a newly commissioned battleship and part of the Great White Fleet, which had just finished a cruise around the world before welcoming Wyatt aboard. With Wyatt serving on the Minnesota, she performed operations in the Caribbean, Cuba, and Mexico, and also along the U.S. East Coast. The Minnesota was refitted that year with a new cage-style mast. She also was completely repainted with what would be called battleship gray if it came from Sherwin-Williams. I've already hinted a few times that we'd see newspaper articles about Wyatt. Well, the very first one was published in February of 1911 in Norfolk's Virginian Pilot.
B. Williamson on the USS Franklin has been arrested by the officials of that ship, charged with flashing a check for $3 and also with forgery. On February 21st, it is alleged that Williamson stole the bankbook of his shipmate, W.E. Teubert, and after practicing how to forge the latter's signature, went out and began flashing checks in a modest way, however. The only check that has been returned is one drawn in favor of Walter Nee of the Globe Cafe, Main Street, near Commercial Place, Norfolk, for $3. But it is understood that there are other checks out which have not been returned. On losing his bankbook containing his account in the Merchants and Planters Bank of Berkeley Ward, and suspecting it had been stolen, Teubert reported the matter to the bank, and the next day a check came in through the clearinghouse, drawn against Mr. Teubert's account. Papers having been found, which threw suspicion on Williamson, he was arrested in Norfolk by a chief master-at-arms who was sent out on the mission. He is now awaiting trial by a general court-martial, which will be conducted sometime next week.
This incident was also Wyatt's first encounter with law enforcement, but not his last. Knowing what I know about him now, I'm pretty sure seeing his own name in the newspaper in any capacity felt satisfying. I would bet he knew somewhere in the recesses of his mind that he'd be reading his name in the news again. Many times.
There's a lot of talk about potential changes to home loans in the news. EMB Mortgage Group has a team of professionals here to answer your questions and set you up for your first home or your next home. EMB can finance your house, land, new build, renovation, investment property, or even your office in Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee, Alabama, or Florida. To talk to a live loan officer, text the word LOAN, L-O-A-N, to 859-200-2709. One of EMB's mortgage experts will jump in to help you get started. Again, text LOAN, L-O-A-N, to 859-200-2709. EMB Mortgage Group is a division of Pro Mortgages, LLC, NMLS 2071, headquarters, Lexington, Kentucky. Equal housing lender.
Wyatt was quickly reassigned to the USS New Hampshire, and of course, that ship is best known for an event that happened while Wyatt was aboard. First, she made her second trip to Europe, and then to the Caribbean to help de-escalate conflicts within Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and then also to Mexico. Then the New Hampshire makes Navy history in a 2-day gunnery training exercise in a shallow part of Chesapeake Bay. She was assigned a target, the USS San Marcos, formerly known as the USS Texas. The San Marcos was anchored near Tangier Island, Virginia, and there she became basically experimental target practice. The New Hampshire, including gunner's mate Wyatt Teubert, fired upon the San Marcos's armored hull for 2 days, evaluating damage periodically to ultimately help in the durable design of future U.S. Navy ships. The San Marcos sunk into the Chesapeake Bay's muddy floor as the gunners of the New Hampshire declared their research victory. Imagine working your tail off training on a ship, and then your bed at night is basically a canvas cocoon tied at each end to the ceiling with ropes. That was the crew's reality in 1911. While sleeping almost 5 feet above the floor of the ship, the rope securing Wyatt's hammock came loose. His back and head both struck the cold metal floor, leaving him unconscious. He was carried to the ship's infirmary, where he finally regained consciousness over an hour later. He was returned to full duty in 2 days, but this injury will have lingering effects. The next year, in 1912, Wyatt was again reassigned, this time to the USS Kentucky, a newly commissioned battleship designed for coastal defense and located at the port of Philadelphia. The Kentucky was armed with 4 13-inch guns in a unique 2-tier design called a double turret after her $100,000 facelift a few months before. In 1912, $100,000 was equivalent to about $3.5 million today. To help with calendar perspective once again, let's see what was in the news in 1912.
American girls now have their own scout organization. The first Girl Scouts of America troop has been formed in Savannah, Georgia.
The Titanic has sunk in the Atlantic.
Extra, extra! Woodrow Wilson has been elected president.
While aboard the Kentucky, at a doctor's visit for the flu, Wyatt mentioned that he had been suffering from back pain, what seemed to be vertigo, and lack of appetite since his fall from the hammock. He was given the 1912 version of Tylenol and a little tummy medication and returned to duty immediately. That same year, a 23-year-old Wyatt's attention was captured by a pretty girl they called May. Mary Scott Clydesdale, a 21-year-old Philadelphia native, was the daughter of an Irish immigrant who was a teamster in the transportation industry. On April 25, 1913, a marriage license was issued for Wyatt and May to marry in Philadelphia. And they weren't the only ones. Also in 1913, Wyatt's mother, widow Ella Jane Teubert, remarried Stuart Hara, to whom she would remain married for the rest of her life. In early 1914, May and Wyatt learned they were expecting their first child. A daughter was born October 12th and named Thelma May Teubert. 1915 was setting up to be the perfect year. Wyatt's family was again growing as May was pregnant with their second child, and his Navy career was getting very exciting. In the spring, Wyatt led the gunnery crew of the USS Cummings to achievement as they were awarded the Torpedo Flotilla Trophy for Excellence. Once again, in June, Wyatt was seen at the infirmary. The best way to describe this visit is to let the doctor tell you himself. This is verbatim from the medical record.
Patient, Wyatt Evans Teubert, 26 years old, states that since falling from his hammock 4 years ago, he has had several attacks of unconsciousness with increasing frequency. The attacks are recently preceded by a disagreeable, chilly feeling. Patient falls down and remains unconscious for several minutes, after which he feels weak and dizzy. He can sometimes prevent an attack by pressing the palm of his hand to his head. No biting of tongue or gross physical injury as a result of these attacks. The first attack occurred several months after the fall from the hammock. Patient reports insomnia, melancholy attitude, and becoming deliberately reclusive in the last few months. Patient voluntarily speaks of and discusses political questions. He showed a typewritten paper on the present German war, which he read to members of the crew on his own accord. Considering the limited education he has received, the patient seems unusually well informed, although he says his memory is not as good, and he cannot learn things as readily as in the past. No delusions of grandeur or persecution. Family history negative, except that an aunt had fainting spells. Current diagnosis, dementia praecox.
Dementia praecox? What the hell is that? You thought it too, didn't you? Well, no need to Google it. I took care of that for you a long time ago. Back then, I fully expected the description to be similar to what you would see as lasting effects of a severe concussion. That made sense to me. But that's not what dementia praecox is. Here's the definition I found and added it to my notes back then. Dementia praecox, a psychiatric diagnosis associated with manic depressive insanity, also known as schizophrenia. I think I read it 100 times. I literally retyped it into Google and read it again. Then I tried Bing, another search engine, with pretty much an identical result. I spent a considerable amount of time on this. I had to. I spoke to a friend who was a doctor, asking her to tell me dementia praecox is an old, outdated diagnosis that means head injury. Nope. As much as she hates Dr. Google, she agreed. This was the end of his military medical record. My last page scanned from those delicate papers confirmed it. If I simply added this fact to my timeline, it fits between getting married and working for a railroad. No. If you know me well, you're shaking your head right now because you know this is exactly the kind of mismatched context and unconnected detail I cannot handle. I needed more information in this gap. That year, when I found all this, I wrote a note in my Wyatt book. It says, "No, this needs explained. Learn more or die trying." Years later, I was into my Wyatt boxes doing my thing, and I read the note again. I still remember feeling the heat hit me. God, do I hate not knowing something that needs to be known. Then a whisper of an imaginary tap on my shoulder led me to ask myself, why is this page just blank after that? The very blankness seemed to be mocking me. Or was it? The bottom of all the other pages looked different. I needed to see my nanny. Even after years of first reading schizophrenia, I had never said that word to Nanny, and I never would until I was satisfied I knew everything. I asked her to show me the original yellowing medical record. I carefully peeled each page apart, unfolding and folding back, looking for the right page. There it was. Dementia praecox. You know what else there was? More.
On evenings and weekends, your host, Joellen Davidson, spends her time behind a microphone. But by day, she's an insurance agent at Brooke Whalen Insurance. If you have a business, a car, a house, a rental, or a heartbeat, you need to talk to Jo about the many great options she has to best protect you plus the people and things you work hard for. Text the word QUOTE to 859-229-4797 or hop over to Facebook or Instagram and follow Jo under the handle Your KY Insurance Agent. Shoot her a message and get a quote today.
When I originally scanned those documents, almost a full page was missing from my copies. More doctor's notes explaining everything in that nagging gap.
Transferring patient to U.S. Naval Hospital, Annapolis, Maryland, where he will be admitted for observation.
Patient, Wyatt Teubert, 26, transferred from USS Missouri for observation 3 days ago, after being diagnosed with dementia praecox at the ship's infirmary. The diagnosis is hereby changed since admission to this facility. Patient has no symptom or sign of dementia praecox, such as emotional deterioration. There is no enfeeblement of mind, no emotional indifference, weakness of judgment, flightiness, negative-mindedness, hallucinations, or other signs of dementia praecox. Current diagnosis: epilepsy. Present condition: unfit for service. Probable future duration: permanent recommendation that he be discharged from naval service.
Wyatt Teubert was invalidated from military service June 14, 1915. That's it. I cried. Partly because I finally had answers that weren't schizophrenia, and partly because I knew Wyatt well enough by this time that I could feel his pain. This was his first failure, at least that's how he'd see it. His military career, the only thing he ever wanted to achieve, was taken away. I thought about the original injury, just as he must have in that moment. One knot tied correctly would have prevented all this. Like many kids in the 70s, I associated the Navy with Popeye the Sailor Man. Kids, that was a cartoon about a sailor who ate spinach to be strong and loved a woman named Olive Oil. I remember references occasionally to sailors' knots in the cartoon, and had seen decorative displays of nautical knots with their names in shadow boxes. But never in a million years, not even today, could I wrap my head around one thing. Wyatt Teubert, this man I had grown to respect as a perfectionist, the man with the answers, hell, the gunner, was taken down and had his career ripped from him because of one sailor's knot? It really is about the little things, isn't it, Wyatt? In this moment, I already knew a little about his future. But even if I hadn't, I would have known one thing for certain. The gunner wouldn't give up that easy, and this will not be the end of his military career. Just watch and see. Wyatt had a family now. There was no time to waste getting another job. Through family connections to the railroad, he was hired by the B&O Railroad Company as a special agent. That was what they called their police force back then. Oh, by the way, there was one more event to finish off 1915. Wyatt and May welcomed a new baby daughter December 12th and named her Virginia after his home state. They called her Jean. Stick around a minute for a preview of the next episode, right after this. I promised an extended episode this week, remember? Here's your bonus content. Over the last few weeks, I haven't just been writing and recording. Oh no. My investigation is still underway and the story continues to evolve. I even made plans over the next year to visit more places Wyatt lived and visited, taking photos, video, and possibly doing some interviews. Speaking of which, I bet you didn't know I have an interview wish list. I'm trying to track down the daughter or granddaughter of one of Wyatt's first two children that I spoke with years ago. I don't have the old email account that I had at that time anymore, so I'm having trouble locating even her name. Back then, she had lots of info about Thelma and Jean, and I can't find much of it. I'm working on tracking that down and tracking her down. I have also recently provided links to the podcast to every Teubert in the vicinity of Fayette County, West Virginia. I'm sorry, I was told it's actually West by God, Virginia. Forgive me. Since some of their aunts and uncles, parents, or grandparents are named in the podcast, I really wanted them to hear it, just in case they find themselves curious about family like I am. I received positive feedback from them and hope if they're listening to this that they didn't think I was being creepy tracking them down. It's what I do now, I guess. If any of you long-lost Teubert relatives have any stories to tell or even questions I may be able to answer for you, please reach out on Facebook or email me. My email address is coming to you in a few minutes. My holy grail of interview wishes is one specific person. This one is tricky because I cannot say his name out loud or in any way give away who he is. I know exactly where to find him. He has a ton of information, and he's very closely tied to Wyatt. Closer than Morgan or myself. Closer than anyone. And in a brief encounter between myself, Morgan, and this person many years ago, he didn't want to talk about it. The man who directly connects him to Wyatt was determined the story should not be told or known. So he was following that person's wishes. I've respected that all these years, and I still respect the wishes of both these men as the story relates to them. But I wasn't going to stop digging from my own point of view. As passionately as he wants the story to have died with Wyatt, my nanny wanted to know everything, and that's what I'm carrying forward with me. So I'll put this out there. I'm going to be driving to this man's town in the fall of 2026. It's quite a distance away from me, at a place I've never even been close to. I'll let him know ahead of time that I'll be there. I'll ask him if he wants to meet somewhere and talk. And I will ask him to tell me everything and beg for permission to tell you in a bonus episode 1 year from now. It has to be that way, with his permission. This part is his story, not mine. But I know some of it, and it's so good. But without his permission, I will never mention him in this podcast. My secret hope is that he's listening to this. I know he's aware of the podcast, even without me making contact. If by chance he wants to talk on the phone, recorded or unrecorded, his choice, I want him to reach out to me. I know if he hears this, he'll know I'm talking about him right now. My email is moonmediapodcasts@gmail.com. moonmediapodcasts with an S at the end @gmail.com. In other bonus news, I sent my DNA off to Ancestry last month, so I'm anxiously awaiting results. Fully expecting to find some new connections, perhaps related to Wyatt, or maybe related to me in some other way. We may have a new podcast brewing, folks. Who knows? For updates on episode release date announcements and more, follow our Facebook page on Moon Media, all one word, or under the handle Moon Media Podcasts on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. On the next episode of Everyone's Wyatt, we're riding the rails with Wyatt, fighting crime and risking everything in the process. Also, with a diagnosis that ended his career as a gunner's mate, how will he recover his military career? As only Wyatt could, that's how. Join me next time for episode 2, called Top Secret. See you there.
Everyone's Wyatt is a production of Moon Media. Researched, written, and edited by Jo Ellen Davidson. Music by Homer V. Sparks.